Petra had been in love with Eric since the 6th grade. He was 2 years older than her and, of course, paid no attention to his secret admirer. Only when he went to the last grade did the boy notice Petra, who had grown prettier over the summer. Luckily for the girl, her dreams were becoming a reality. They were able to maintain a tender and reverent relationship during their time at university. They did not manage to get into the same institution, because where Eric studied, Petra could not pass on a budget, and her parents would never have been able to afford the tuition. On the day they celebrated her graduation, Eric, very nervous and stuttering, gave her the ring. Lucky Petra, of course, said yes. Once at school, she had cried from unrequited love for this man. And now he was sitting across from her, smiling, with his eyes wet with tears. She wanted to scream with joy. Her relationship with Petra had first been in a severe crisis in the 3rd year of their marriage. It started with a failed pregnancy attempt, which ended in hospitalization and depression for Petra. She became estranged from Eric, and they almost stopped talking, although her husband tried his best to help her cope with what had happened. They spent about a year as strangers sleeping in the same bed. The spouses were like exposed wires. Touch it, and you'll regret it. They were both scared. There seemed to be no chance of getting their family back together again. A year later, they were getting to know each other all over again. Eric would ask his wife out, and they would chat, drink wine, and eat delicious food. They went to exhibitions and museums, visited the theater. There was a ray of hope in life. Not all was lost. On February 23, Petra gave him a box containing a pregnancy test. 9 months later, Eric held little Katie in his arms. An exact replica of his mother, even the tiny nose was pulled just like hers. As Daddy looked at his daughter, a wave of happiness swept over him. They'd made it. They'd been able to get through the crisis and get to the next level. And the proof of that was Katie. The man relaxed. He believed that all the worst was behind them, and they had a bright future ahead of them. He could not imagine that after this experience they would part with Petra. He hadn't known at the time that things would be different. To catch her breath from the endless diapers and undressing, and to take a break from maternity leave, Petra began to go out on outings with her friends. At first, it was an occasional couple of times a month to unwind. But the older Katie got, the more often her mother began to leave the house. Eric tried to be an understanding husband. He supported his wife and never denied her desire for a break. But he began to feel like it was getting out of hand. "Petra, have you seen what time it is? Why do I have to watch you when you come home?" The husband itched as his wife returned, barely on her feet by morning. "So what?" Barely moving her tongue, replied Petra. "I can afford it. I earn." Eric could not reproach his wife for that. She did go to work, though not every day. Her grandmother was taking care of the baby. Sometimes the woman would take advantage of this and tell her mother that she had been called away to work somewhere. Then she would meet her friend in a cafe or go to the movies. Sometimes she wandered alone through the mall, just to avoid sitting at home. Petra herself did not realize at what point she was suddenly turned away from motherhood. She didn't want to sit with her daughter at all. She liked her freedom. She wished she had left her husband that awful year. And now it was silly to leave. The little girl needed her father. Petra didn't want to deprive her of that. Just then, she had met a man at a club. He was a little older than her, handsome, with money, confident. Petra melted at the sight of him. Every time Fred was around, her legs buckled. She started laughing stupidly and flirting with him in all sorts of ways. Of course, she didn't succeed in hiding her husband and child, but she played that their relationship with Eric was already on the verge of divorce, and the daughter he threatens to take from her mother. Fred already disliked Petra's husband in absentia and felt sorry for her every time. It was to the woman's advantage. Their relationship was developing rapidly. Petra could not say that she was in love with Fred. She had fun with him. She enjoyed his company. The man gave her gifts, took her to restaurants. It was as if she was living another free life when I was with him, while a crying baby and husband were waiting for her at home. Eric noticed that his wife was getting new things, often not cheap, even saving money from her salary, and the man did not understand where they all came from. Petra lied about borrowing something from a friend, about how she had bought a new bracelet for pennies. At first her husband believed her, but every day her faith faded, until one day it went out altogether. The scandals began. The couple were well aware that it was going to divorce, but no one could make the first step and stop it. Eric didn't want to lose his sweetheart to the last. He did not understand how she had changed from a good wife and mother who was reverent about her family into this woman, a woman who did not want to be near her child, who no longer treated her spouse with tenderness. Eric shared everything with his mother. The older woman listened to everything, nodding silently and sighing quietly, saying, you should have separated, and then the broken won't be glued back together. Quietly she spoke, but I love her. If we hadn't kept the family together, we wouldn't have had Katie. The daughter was a ray of light in Eric's life. He loved the girl as much as he could and could no longer imagine his life without her. He would do anything for Katie. One day, Eric was coming home from work. He parked his car and was approaching the driveway, where a man was sitting on a bench next to him. At the sight of Eric, the man got up and blocked his way. He was about half a head taller, a look that didn't bode well. "What do you want?" Eric asked as calmly as possible. "I am about to tell you," the stranger said just as calmly. "Leave Petra alone." At what he heard, the man even jumped. "What do you mean, leave her alone? She is my wife. We had a family. I know your family. She has told me all about you." The stranger hovered over Eric and looked at him menacingly. He asked me to tell him what it was all about and why the person he was talking to thought that Petra had a bad life with her husband, and how he knew her in the first place. The unknown was Fred, to whom the mistress had once again told stories about the tyrant husband who refused to divorce her and wanted to take her daughter. Eric listened to everything Fred said with his eyes wide open. He wants to take Katie away. He's a tyrant who doesn't give his wife any money and chastises her with every penny. From what he heard, the man suddenly began to laugh. The situation was so silly that the man could not believe that this was really happening to him. From Eric's reaction, the man knew something was wrong. The man suggested that Fred go upstairs to them, and the three of them discuss what was going on. "Let her say it all to my face." Smiling sadly, the cheating husband said. When her husband entered the apartment first, followed by his lover, Petra was out of breath. She could not move from the shock and only flapped her eyes, looking at the entrance. The men demanded an explanation despite the fact that each of them already understood everything. After that situation, it was as if a heavy weight had been lifted from Eric's shoulders. He hadn't realized how much the whole situation with his wife, with the scandals and her constant withdrawals, had been weighing on him. Now his eyes were open, and he saw everything clearly. He calmly decided to get a divorce, not trying to save the marriage anymore. Under the pretext of moving to another city, Petra left her daughter to her father. He did not resist. He was happy that the little girl would live with him. Eric was sure that he and Katie would have an interesting life full of beautiful moments. Sometimes Petra would call, even less often she would visit them. Katie hardly ever asked about her mother. It was a stranger to her, who for some reason called her daughter. He knew that his wife had gone to conquer the capital and met another man there, with whom she now lived together. Eric sincerely wanted to believe that his ex-wife would find happiness and perhaps be able to start a family again. He no longer held a grudge against Petra. After all, everything is for the best. So that's the story. Share in the comments what you think about this situation and the behavior of the characters.